And really, what is permaculture? It's to me, and there's many schools of thought under the permaculture umbrella, but to me, it's advanced gardening. And you're going to garden on a massive scale, and then you're going to have an excess of something which you will sell somehow, but I would not advocate the farmer's market. All right, I've got some other, apparently I'm running out of time, and I'm going, all the things would fill many, many libraries, but polyculture, I think, let's go to the next slide. This is Bunny Love carrots. It's a monocrop, but it's organic. Now, imagine a carrot, and a carrot has needs. Just like you, the carrot has its needs. How many people here are vegans? Go ahead, I'm not going to pick on you. Hold your hand. Vegetarians. There's like, I don't know, what is there, like probably 50 kinds of diets out there, and they're all labeled as like, this is the way you should live your life. I mean, basically, we all have the English language, and we still can't figure out what's the optimal thing to eat. Pie. It's pie. Thank you. Yeah. Pie. A carrot doesn't even talk. And we're doing our best to try and figure, well, carrot doesn't take very much nitrogen, because you give it the nitrogen, it gets kind of woolly, and then no one wants to buy the carrot. So you got to give it just enough. This is a root crop, so, P and K. Don't forget some calcium. pH needs to be right. So, we figured out some amendments. Now, another thing is, of course, in an organic system, so this is Bunny Love, so it's organic, they're going to till 3 times more often than in a conventional system. So they lose their organic matter much faster. So they're adding manures in there like crazy to try to be able to get a decent carrot crop. Then comes the whole thing where it's like, in order to harvest it, they're going to kill a lot of fuzzy little animals and feed this stuff to vegans who are going to eat it because it doesn't kill any fuzzy little animals. How does a carrot grow in nature? If you find a carrot growing in nature, is it growing with thousands of other carrots like this and nothing else is around it? I'm going to guess no. It's going to grow with a bunch of other plants, and their roots can touch. Now, evidence has shown, there's been research done, and it shows that if you have a bunch of plants and they're all near each other and it's a polyculture, then you're going to inject something into a plant, and within days it pops up in another plant 10 feet away. So somehow that stuff made it over there. Every plant has exudates. And it's like, it turns out that one plant that got injected with the stuff exuded that stuff, and another plant picked it up 10 feet away. And it turns out that the plant that picked it up was actually got it secondarily. There was another plant in between that got it from the first plant and then exuded it, and it ended up with the third plant. Then you add mycelium to the soil. And so mycelium is going to be fungus. And so the thing about mycelium is you'll notice if you've ever looked at any kind of fungus, whether it's mycelium, webby, rooty stuff, or the fruiting body, which looks like a mushroom, that whenever you look at it, it has no leaves on it. It's not green. And yet, fungus loves sugar. So then this webby stuff that's of the mycelium goes over to the carrot and touches the carrot, and it says, hey, you got any sugar, man? Because I can really use some sugar. And the carrot says, maybe. What do you got in exchange? Okay, man. I've got all kinds of things. I've got a little bit of oak tree. I've got a little bit of cabbage. I've got a little bit of tomato. I've got water. I could use some water. The exchange happens. In fact, it's been shown that when you put that gick into that first plant, and then it goes to the second plant, which goes to the third plant, that the whole transaction happens 10 times more and 10 times faster with mycelium in the soil. And the mycelium itself is a really good nutrient miner from the soil. It's got the ability to extract minerals directly from rocks that plants can't extract it themselves. Now, you all know about huckleberries, right? I mean, in Montana, Woohoo, huckleberry! I had some huckleberry wine on the way here. Huckleberries! How many of you grow huckleberries in your garden? What? Yeah? Zero. Oh, zero. Okay. I thought the woman next to you was saying, I grow. And I was going to say, liar! You lie! Now, there are some people who claim that they can do it, but it's a very complicated system because there's a symbiotic relationship with the huckleberry and several kinds of mycelium that must also have a symbiotic relationship with certain conifers. And without all of those other relationships, you cannot grow huckleberries domestically, which is why they're still harvested only in the wild. Suddenly, that mycelium's looking like some pretty powerful stuff. And it also looks like polyculture is having some value. Now, next slide please, if you have a polyculture going on, then, in fact, Sepp Holtzer does this thing where all the stuff that he plants, whenever he creates a polyculture, he always says, you need to have your taprooted species, and you need to have your nitrogen-fixing species, and you need to have your food-bearing species. You need to have all three mixed together. Oh, here's the slide I want. So you need to have the plants with the taproots. They're going to go down, and they're going to find that water, and they're going to have lots and lots and lots of water, which they'll gladly share. I mean, they'll exude it a lot. And then sometimes they'll exude it with certain other species intentionally to get what it is that they're looking for, and a lot of times with mycelium. So if you have a lot of aged soil, also called soil structure. I like the phrase soil structure the best. Some people say tilth. There's a lot of other words that we can go into and what they mean and how they're like this. But soil structure, old soil, loaded with mycelium, and there's going to be a lot of this kind of exchange throughout. And then, of course, mix that in with a polyculture. And now you've got all your growies are getting lots of water from those species that have a taproot, and then you're going to get lots of your nutrients from all the other plants. I believe that plants get most of their nutrients from other plants. And so we're putting all this stuff in the soil to feed the plants, but really, I think, most of the nutrition of plants comes from other plants. And there's nothing you can buy in the grocery store, even your most organic grocery stores can do that, because even the bunny love carrots are grown in a monocrop. In fact, I'm going to speculate, and I've actually got some scientific evidence to back this up. If you go to an organic grocery store, the healthiest thing you can buy in the whole store is going to be organic pastured beef. Because those cattle were eaten from polyculture. These are pastures that are just riddled with weeds, and they're eating all of that. And so they're eating from an authentic polyculture, and the nutrients are concentrating in their cells, which we then later eat as beef. All right, one more thing about taproots. If you ever transplant anything, you lose the taproot. Please, somebody challenge me on that. I want a nurseryman. Are there any nurserymen here who want to challenge me on it? Bring it. I gave this presentation to a group of soil scientists, and one guy in the audience was a nurseryman, and he took me on. And he said that he has dug up plants that he has transplanted, taprooted plants that he has transplanted, and it still had a taproot. And I said, liar! It had 4 taproots, didn't it? He says, how did you know that? So instead of having one magnificent taproot that'll go down 60 feet, you have 4 sucky taproots that go down like 12 feet. It's not as good. It's not the same thing. And the thing is that's like, I gave the last presentation, people go, why? Why? It's transplant shock. Well, why does it have transplant shock? Ask it. I don't know. It just won't do it. Apple trees have a taproot. It just seems like they don't because everybody starts their apple tree from a transplant and not from seed. But if you start your apple tree from seed, you get the taproot. And then there will always be somebody who says, no, you can't do that because then only 1 in 20,000 of them is worth anything. Well, it depends on what you call worth anything. Only 1 in 20,000 will be able to compete with Macintosh in an open market, like at the grocery store. But 20% of the trees that come up are going to be really great, and 20% are going to be what we call spitters. And I think your imagination can fill in why we call them that. And then there's going to be 60%, they're going to be something in between. They're fine for fresh eating, but not really good for keeping. They're going to be fine for making pies, but not for making applesauce, whatever. They're going to have limited function. All of them are great for feeding to pigs and chickens. All right, this is your question from earlier. Why do we build the Hugelkultur 6 feet tall instead of 3 feet tall and half of it's underground where you can't see it? And it's this. Now these are going to be berms, which are typically 15 feet tall, but the general idea is still the same. And that is that wind is desiccating and cooling. You live in a cool climate, cooling is not good. So if you have the wind go over your berms, you're going to have all these growies down between the berms that are going to be much warmer and much moister. Next slide, please. Then we're going to take those same ideas and go a little bit further. So if you've got flat land, it's all homogeneous. It all has basically the same amount of water. But if you've got texture to the landscape, now you've got dry spots, like up on the top, and maybe something in between, between the top and the bottom, and then between these Hugelkultur beds or these berms or whatever, you're going to have very wet spots. You've concentrated the water into these spots. So now you have wet spots and dry spots. And you needed some wet spots for your wet-loving plants, and you needed some dry-loving spots, or some dry spots for the plants that love things to be quite a bit drier. Now, that is the number one reason why I don't like it when people bury their Hugelkultur. And so I go back to recipe 1, where we get it to be as big as we can get it. And you're going to start making it like 7 feet tall, and after a couple of years, it's going to be 5.5 feet tall. And normally I'm going to say 6 feet tall for the Hugelkultur beds, 6 feet between Hugelkultur beds, because the growies are going to grow out of the sides. The growies are going to grow out of the sides, and then it's going to eat up all of your paddock. Who here has done paddock shift systems? Oh, good. Oh, good. Because I'm going to say something crazy. It's going to sound totally nuts. It's going to sound like the opposite of truth. And I need people who have done this before to validate what I'm going to say. Because you probably assume everything I say is a lie anyway, so, some kind of support here. When you use paddock shift systems, and basically what this is you're going to have like 5 different areas. Then you put animals in for like, let's say a week. And then you move them out of that area, and then that area gets like at least 28 days of rest before the animals come back into that area. And you just pulse it like that over and over and over again. I mean, there's more to it, but that's generally it. That's really 80% of it. And when you do this, you get 5 times more growies. Okay, those of you that held your hands up earlier, hold your hands up again, and let's go through one by one. Is what I'm saying true?
8 times as much.
8 times? That's a new one on me. I love that. Yes. All right. The thing is, it's bizarre, but and it's like when you study it, and there's been a lot of studies. I mean, like if you just leave it there, and you fence all animals out of it, deer, elk, moose can't get in there. You have made an amazing fence, and you leave it, then you have a certain amount of growies going on each year. And I think you probably noticed that it gets to be less each year too. There's actually studies on that. It's a form of desertification, keeping all ruminants out of an area. But yeah, kids, you come in here, I'm going to teach you some words. I got things to teach. So then you move these ruminants and there's like all this extra life comparatively, and it's like it just turns into a massive jungle. It's bizarre how much more there is, and it's kind of like, okay, there's 40 different things that cause that. And I think, now those of you that have done it before have probably done some of the reading and you know some of the reasons, but there's like 40 different things. But for those of you that are kind of like, I don't get it, how does that work? I'm going to give you one thing. I'm going to tell you the one thing, and you're going to be like, oh, that's just obvious and stupid. But okay, here's the one thing. I am a cow. And this orange cord that keeps threatening me is water. And so chug-a-lug, 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 chug-a-lug. And over here is not water. Whee! I moved the water. 1 out of 40. Next slide, please. Ruthie! The queen of mulch. At a time when there was not persistent herbicides, but we've talked about this enough. And I think most of us know about the magic of mulch. And you've got, and here in permaculture these days we use chop and drop. There's something growing on your Hugelkultur that you don't want, you chop it and you leave it there. And it smothers out stuff you don't want, and you place it in such a way that the stuff that you do want isn't going to get smothered. Next slide, please. This is in Ritzville. You can see the Ritzville back in here. That's where the nuclear wars happened. And at my last presentation, there was a guy, not this guy, but the guy that owns this land was at my presentation. And he was saying that the scorched earth effect that they have out there is caused by agriculture and their practices out there. But he says that they get about 3 inches of rain a year. And so then this is referred to as a type of air well. And what it is that the rocks on the outside are exposed to the sun, but the rocks on the inside are not exposed to the sun. They're in shade all the time. Warm, moist air moves through the pile. Water condenses on those cold rocks and lands on the ground. And we go to the next slide. And apparently, the guy that built that, he threw a bunch of plum pits into the rocks. And these are plum trees. And they said this year they had the most magnificent plums off of these 2 plum trees. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're getting into Keyline stuff. Now, permaculture has got a lot of cool stuff, but now from the framework of permaculture, we talk about Keyline. We just talked about the Keyline plow, but really, permaculture stole a lot of stuff from the Keyline folks. PA Yeomans. Next slide. So this is kind of what a lot of larger permaculture designs look like. You're going to try to hold that water on the land as long as possible. Notice this is sloped land. So the water is going to come, and we're going to come up with a system of like capturing it, and then it's going to go downhill to another capture point, downhill to another capture point, and back and forth, and back and forth, and then eventually we're going to let it off the land. We held a lot of it onto the land. Keyline, using a keyline plow is a broadacre technique. It's something that you use when you have 20,000 acres to get your land to stay greener for 2 extra weeks out of the year. I am choosing to skip that at today's presentation because we're low on time. Next slide, please. Next slide. Who's seen The Man Who Planted Trees? This is, oh good, it's an amazing, out of all the permaculture videos out there, I'd say this is in the top 5 list. It's an animated show. It's based on a true story. And in a nutshell, a guy walks into a desert area, nothing is growing. And they're a sign of how there used to be creeks, and they're a sign of abandoned villages where there used to be water, and there used to be fountains. And he walks on, and he's about to die of dehydration, and he meets a guy. And this guy has an obsession. And first the guy gives him some water, But the guy has an obsession. He plants 100 tree seeds each day. It's his thing. That's what he does. Been doing it for years. So then the first guy goes away and comes back 10 years later, and there's forests everywhere. And the creeks have returned. Based on a true story. And it's true, when you plant a lot of taprooted species in an area where the creek has gone dry, it will raise the water table and the creek will return. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the list. Okay, so everything that's grayed out is stuff we already talked about. Adding water features to the land is not necessarily, how many people have been to a permaculture system on a warm day? Like a permaculture farm, yeah. And when you walk in the morning, your legs get soaked with morning dew. And you can go to a property a mile away, same time of day, and there might be grasses there, and your legs don't get soaked with morning dew. Accurate. She nods her head. So the thing is that when you have water features around your land, it puts a lot more moisture into the air, which ends up as a lot more morning dew, and that is a big source of water. Terraces, swales are great for a tropical area. There's a podcast with me and Jeff Lawton arguing about this, and Jeff insisted that swales are great for a cold climate, and I insisted that they are not, that they always create a frost pocket. A year later, he and I recorded another podcast about some other topic, but he started off saying, I need to correct something. He thinks that swales are not a good idea. So he agrees with me. Not a good idea for cold climates. They're great for tropical areas, and Jeff lives in a subtropical area. But swales are basically long, skinny ponds that follow a contour line. Basically, you're making a huge ditch on contour, but you want it to be kind of a leaky ditch. And you're going to plug both ends of the ditch. It's like a long, skinny pond. And water comes down the hill, fills the swale, and then eventually soaks into the landscape. But it's always a frost pocket. By the way, do not build Hugelkultur on contour. That's a terrible idea. Some people get that idea, just don't do it. I think that after this presentation, the reasons why should be fairly obvious. Never transplant, start everything from seed. I think we already talked about dew ponds. Dew ponds are something where there's no water flowing in. The only water that ever fills a dew pond is going to be rain that's flowing straight into the dew pond, or snow, or something like that. And you're going to collect that water and hold on to it to add moisture to the area. Some people refer to it as a mosquito breeding area. There's ways to mitigate that. And then other people refer to it as that festering stink hole. And there's ways to mitigate that. But a lot of farms will use a lot of dew ponds, and it does help. Edge, we talked about a little bit, and of course shade. There's a lot of the plants that we grow will actually grow far better if they have half as much sun. I mean, they'll produce twice as much with half as much sun. And so don't be giving all of your plants all day sun. The end. Thank you, everybody.